Turks on a crazy, momentous day. Iowa Caucus. What now? Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian. Look, we got a 2-hour show for you guys, chock full of news. Look, the Hillary Clinton, Rashida Tlaib, John Kerry stuff, it goes to 11. Okay, my rage, passion, whatever you want to call it, goes to 11. So we're gonna get to that in a little bit. Here comes Bernie. Okay, tonight, I've got great guests for you guys too. Amanda Turk from Huffington Post, she's the Washington bureau chief. We got Crystal Ball on the show. We got a post game for you guys, but then starting at 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern, here comes Iowa. Today's the day. Today's the day. Iowa caucuses, we will have results. We will have a winner. Look, Bernie can lose and then it'll be devastating. Or Bernie can win and maybe win by a lot. I don't say it yet. No. We don't know anything yet. But me, Anna, John, Ben, and Emma's in Iowa, and she's gonna join us from Iowa and give us a report as to what's happening. Bernie is leading in the latest set of polls, and there's drama around that as well, as we're gonna get to right away. But anything can happen today. But today is the day where we begin, if we're lucky and going in the right direction, the progressive era. I said it.
All right, well, luckily we can go to the Des Moines Register poll to figure out.
Oh, let's figure it out, let's go to it.
Except no, apparently they got word from their boss, Pete Buttigieg, and that poll will not be coming out. So we'll talk about that story first. Why don't we get right to it?
Let's do it.
All right. Some scandal and intrigue regarding the Iowa caucuses. Of course, the Iowa caucuses will take place today, but in the lead up to it, everyone was expecting the Des Moines Register poll. This is a coveted poll that everyone was looking forward to, just analyzing to figure out who the likely winner in the Democratic primary will be in Iowa. And here's what we found out. CNN and the Des Moines Register chose not to release this key poll because Pete Buttigieg's campaign was concerned that there was a human error in conducting the poll. So via tweet, it was confirmed that our campaign received a report from a recipient of the Iowa poll call, raising concerns that not every candidate was named by the interviewer when asked who they support. We shared this with the organizations behind the poll, who conducted an internal investigation and determined not to release it. We applaud CNN and the Des Moines Register for their integrity. So what happened? Turns out that the poll was conducted by telephone, and it was conducted from a call center where operators read from a prepared script of candidates' names to determine who a voter plans to support. Apparently, one operator had enlarged the font size on their computer screen, perhaps cutting off Buttigieg's name from the list of options, and that's according to 2 people familiar with the incident who did not have permission to speak about it publicly. So sounds like that's the excuse they're using, that this was a big enough error to decide to scrap the poll altogether. They will not be releasing it.
Okay, so let's talk about why people are scratching their heads over this. So the couple of reasons. Number one, if you believe in political intrigue, if you were trailing in that poll badly, CNN was going to do a whole hour-long special about the poll. You would not want that broadcast right before the election. This is not a great thing about people in general, but it is true that if people get a sense that someone is winning, they are more likely to vote for them. Now, I wish that weren't the case because that makes no logical sense, but people do act that way. In fact, that's why I said the media rigged the last election in favor of Hillary Clinton more than anyone, because they kept putting up superdelegate count when the superdelegates hadn't voted yet. It gave the appearance that she had an overwhelming lead. And we know that that psychological factor helps the person with the lead. So CNN was about not only Des Moines Register poll, but CNN was gonna broadcast the whole nation about how Bernie had a giant lead. And then
you can't do that.
No. So now the second part of it is, so if you were the person who doesn't have that lead, who used to have that lead, Buttigieg, but no longer does and has now slipped considerably in all the polling, Buttigieg, you would not want that special to go on under any circumstances. So I don't know that they had somebody say, hey, maybe I didn't hear Buttigieg's name, and maybe that's a good reason to pull it. I don't know that, okay? But some people are scratching their heads. Now, let's just flip it for a second. Could you imagine if a Bernie Sanders supporter said, I didn't see Bernie's name on the poll?
I can imagine it. I can certainly imagine it.
That the Des Moines Register and the New York Times and CNN would all pull what they were doing.
That I can't imagine.
What they had planned for 4 years in terms of Des Moines Register, last poll before Iowa. This is their moment in the sun. Right. CNN is going to do an hour-long show that they've already planned. And one Bernie Sanders supporter complained. They would never, ever pull it, and everyone knows it.
No, but hold on. Let's start from like the very beginning of the story. One Buttigieg supporter raised concerns. One.
That's right.
One.
Yes.
And then the Buttigieg camp confirmed, said, hey, we have this one supporter who said this is what happened. They launched an internal investigation. Like, I think it's the right thing to do because you want to be fair. So I'm not even mad at Buttigieg raising the concern. I mean, put yourself in his shoes, I would do the same thing, right? But I do have a problem with this obvious double standard because how many times have there been issues with polls not mentioning Bernie? How many times have issues been raised, even when it comes to actual voting and what happens to people who vote for Bernie at the polls, right? But no one cares. It doesn't matter if there's like a giant wave of people complaining or finding some sort of injustice in how things are done. There's never any type of internal investigation.
Yeah, people online were joking like this is Buttigieg asking to see the manager, right? I want to see your manager, okay?
Yeah.
And you know that if you're a certain category of folks and you want to see the manager, it ain't gonna work out for you. If you're another category of folks, it's gonna work out glowingly, and that's what happened here. In this case, it isn't about race at all, it's establishment privilege. So if a progressive complains, they're like, oh, you guys are always complaining. So what, we left you out of the polls, so what? So what? Go cry somewhere else.
So what if we tell everyone that your preferred candidate makes our skin crawl, but we don't give any reason for it? So why are you guys always complaining? What's the problem? Yeah, exactly.
But Buttigieg says, you gotta trust me. You gotta trust me, and you gotta trust my one supporter that it really happened. Based on that, I'm gonna sink the entire, well, the establishment guy asked. There was a report of a one guy maybe, and they sank the whole thing, okay? Now, to back up Anna's point, oftentimes progressives are even left out of polls. At this point, obviously they're not gonna leave Bernie out of a poll that he's leading in. I say obviously, it's only semi-obvious. Anyway, but at the congressional level, at the state level, et cetera, whenever a progressive is running, a lot of times, not every time, not at all, but a lot of times they get left out of polls entirely. They're like, oh, please, you are not endorsed by anyone in the establishment. No, we shall not even put you in a poll. And the progressive candidate, their supporters can complain. It never matters. It always falls on deaf ears. But if an establishment figure has one person who's a maybe, you just crater everything. And last thing, do you know what's happening in the California ballot? It's unbelievable. They went to a new digital ballot. Buttigieg is complaining about this. In the new digital ballot in California, there's only 4 candidates per page, and you're allowed to vote after the first page. And you don't necessarily know that there's a second page. So for the presidential election, the only major candidate on the first page is Elizabeth Warren. Bernie's number 8 on the list. A lot of people won't have any idea that they have to scroll down. They don't know that you have to scroll down. So they might never see Bernie. By the way, it's not a conspiracy. Joe Biden's screwed even worse. He's at number 16.
Well, maybe they'll do something about it then.
No, I'm not kidding. Yeah. That was the best news, was that Biden was at 16. Right. No offense to Biden, I'm not trying to, that's random, right? And I just told you it's not conspiratorial, right? And so I feel bad for Biden, and he shouldn't get screwed either, right? But the fact that Biden's at number 16 means somebody might do something about it.
Right, absolutely.
If Biden and Buttigieg were on the first page, nobody would ever do anything about it.
Or Klobuchar, right?
Right.
Exactly. Well, look, let's talk about what we do see from the polls that were put out. And this is from an Emerson poll showing that Bernie is doing really well in the state of Iowa. The poll, which surveyed likely Democratic caucus goers from January 30th through February 2nd, shows Sanders at 28%, followed by Democratic primary rival Joe Biden at 21%. Former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, Senator Elizabeth Warren, and Senator Amy Klobuchar are at 15%, 14%, and 11% respectively.
And I don't know why you read that. Buttigieg didn't want you to read that. It's outrageous to give people facts.
He just didn't complain to my manager.
Oh, that's the problem. Okay, by the way, I want to give a shout out to Klobuchar. because I came in at the beginning of this process with Klobuchar, right? But here she is at the end in the top 5 in Iowa at 11%. That is not bad. So I underestimated Senator Klobuchar, and so good for her to have run a super strong campaign. I don't agree with her policies. She's maybe the most conservative Democrat left in the field, so I've got no interest in that. But I'm telling you, to be fair, hell of a campaign from someone I didn't think had much of a chance. Yes, it was aided and abetted by mainstream media who kept pushing her, but still, they pushed a lot of people who didn't make it, and Klobuchar is there at the end. Nice work.
Okay, I'm gonna let that one go. I don't think you underestimated her at all. I think she's exactly where she should be, and I don't think she's gonna move anywhere else.
No, I don't think she's gonna move. Yeah, so, I don't think she has any chance at all, but I thought she was gonna drop out way earlier. So that's all I'm saying.
Okay, I guess I didn't let it go.
Yeah, apparently not.
Let's move on to some John Kerry related news. So, former Secretary of State John Kerry was overheard by an NBC reporter talking about how disturbed he is that Bernie Sanders might be the Democratic nominee, and he was apparently discussing the possibility of entering the race. Now, he has denied it, but not really. I'll give you his response to this reporting in just a minute. But first, let's go to the details. Here's an MSNBC segment where an NBC reporter explains what happened.
Our colleague Jonathan Allen overheard the former Secretary of State and actually one of the most prominent Biden surrogates who's been campaigning here for him in Iowa, overheard him on a phone call this morning speaking at a hotel lobby where, of course, there are a lot of reporters and campaign staff hanging around. It sounded like the former Secretary of State was talking about what it would take for him to enter the race late. He was talking about concern he had about Bernie Sanders' candidacy and what it would take to prevent him from being the nominee. Now, Kerry, in a comment to Allen after he was reached out to about this, said he was not contemplating a late run. But you wouldn't necessarily understand that by seeing Kerry on the stump. He actually appeared with Joe Biden at 2 of his campaign rallies yesterday, really supporting his candidacy, encouraging. But I asked Kerry last month, we attended one of the events he was doing on his own, and I asked him, you're campaigning so hard here in Iowa. It seems like you're having so much. Is there any part of you that thinks about getting in this race or thinks that if you had gotten in that you had a chance? I want to read his answer to me, and this was a month ago. He says, well, I knew I could do it. That wasn't the issue. The issue is my friend Joe Biden's in this race, and what's important is to have a president to get the job done. I said, so no regrets about getting into the race. He said, your juices get flowing. I'd be a liar if I didn't say you don't come out here and have some fun. Your juices get going.
Okay, so let me just give you a few more details. According to NBC's original report on this, sitting in the lobby restaurant of the Renaissance, Kerry was overheard by an NBC News analyst saying, maybe I'm effing deluding myself here. He was. And explaining that to run, he'd have to step down from the board of Bank of America and give up his ability to make paid speeches. Kerry said donors like venture capitalist Doug Hickey would have to, quote, raise a couple of million, adding that such donors now have the reality of Bernie.
Okay, so much to say here. Okay, so, and there's an update from John Kerry's non-denial in a second, and that's really important. So first off, wow, what a betrayal of Biden.
I mean, are you surprised though? You think these people have any loyalty to one another? I'm not surprised by any of that.
Yeah, earlier, the month ago, as the reporter just explained, he was like, I didn't run because of my loyalty to Joe Biden.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's got my juices going. I got my juices going.
Yeah, you made a calculation. You thought you couldn't win. That's why you backed Biden, trying to sneak back into government so you could help Bank of America and all the other folks that you're connected to, right? So that's one, a betrayal of Biden. Number two, it was emphasizing the original story and is now kind of dropped out of a lot of the stories I've read about it. It's that John Kerry was basically saying Biden ain't gonna win. Bernie's gonna beat Biden. And that's why once Biden loses, and it's obvious he's gonna lose, then I'm thinking of coming in. So the people closest to Biden are the ones going, he ain't gonna win. Remember, Obama said these old white men, they were in politics too long. He might have been referring to Bernie as well, but he was definitely referring to Biden. That's Obama saying that about Biden. They're worried about Biden. And I don't know if they think there's something wrong with him, but they think he's gonna lose. Okay, that's for sure. Now we move on to Bernie, and actually the core of this story, which is how the Democratic Party works. I'm gonna call a venture capitalist. They don't like Bernie Sanders. Well, I'm already with the bankers. I'm already on the board of Bank of America. I'm making a ton of money from the bankers. but I'll call someone else in finance, step off for now, wink, wink, okay? Get finance guys to back me, get Wall Street to back me.
A couple mil.
Yeah, just throw in a couple of million. What's the big deal? Because they now realize, oh no, Bernie's gonna win, okay? And so now here come the bankers, not bankrolling the Republican Party, bankrolling the Democratic Party, saying, make sure that you defeat that guy who's actually gonna serve the average American. Go get him, John Kerry. And he's thinking about it. He's like, oh, maybe I'll get in. By the way, get in, the water's warm. Come on, John, come on, get in. See how that turns out for you. Oh, because you had all these genius moderates that they were gonna put into the race. Where are they, where are they? Oh, they're at the bottom, they're at the absolute bottom. What happened? Okay, yeah, get in, embarrass yourself, humiliate yourself. But understand who corporate Democrats work for. They work for Wall Street. Understand why they can't stand Bernie Sanders, because he works for you.
So when he was asked about that phone conversation, he attempted to deny things, but not really. So let me give you the statement. Asked about the call later Sunday, Kerry said he was absolutely not contemplating joining the Democratic primary race. He reiterated the sentiment in a tweet later saying, quote, any report otherwise is effing or categorically false. Minutes later, he deleted the tweet and reposted it without the expletive. And he also said, quote, a friend who watches too much cable called me wondering whether I'd ever jump into the race late in the game if Democrats were choosing an unelectable nominee.
Yeah. Spare us your gut opinion.
I listed all the reasons I could not possibly do that and would not and will not under any circumstances do that.
Yeah. Okay, but I want to read you the sentence above that because it's so important. First, he does the same thing that a lot of corporate Democrats do. Sometimes they'll throw in a curse word to.
So edgy.
Yeah, that's right. To substitute in for actual authentic passion, right?
Yep.
So like, oh, I was effing not do that. But here's the important sentence that came right above the quote that Anna just read. This is a complete and total misinterpretation based on overhearing only one side of a phone conversation. Oh, in other words, you did say it. So you said it, not that they're lying, because it's not like, look, I'm super open to believing that mainstream media might lie, okay? But you're admitting they weren't lying, that you did say that, but they heard one side of a conversation. Who cares about the other side of the conversation? What they heard was all the quotes that we just read you. So apparently that was true. You're saying it's just misinterpreted. Okay, you interpret it any way you like, but you saying I'm gonna call a venture capitalist to give me a couple of $1 million because Bernie might win and we know Biden's gonna lose. I interpret that as exactly what you just said, right? You can interpret it any other way, but you're full of crap.
Yeah, look, I believe the way that it's been interpreted by NBC News, not because I happen to believe or trust everything NBC News reports, but because John Kerry serves on the board of Bank of America. Of course he doesn't like Bernie Sanders. Of course he'd want to get involved in this race to prevent, in his mind, to prevent Bernie Sanders from becoming the Democratic nominee, right? So if you look at his career, if you look at what John Kerry has stood for, this is something that you can definitely believe he would say in regard to Bernie Sanders, especially when it comes to this race, where Bernie at the moment, and hopefully for the remainder of this race, is the front runner.
Yeah, and they're forcing us to say this one last thing. They're forcing us. Bernie's unelectable, I might have to jump in. Wait, what do you mean unelectable? Didn't your sorry ass lose to clown George W. Bush? And you have the temerity to talk about unelectable. George W. Bush has an IQ of 68 or so. He's one of the dumbest people alive. Yes, Trump managed to outdumb him. But remember, Bush was an absolute fool. And he had gotten us into the debacle that is the Iraq War. He'd already screwed up so many different things. It was hard to lose to Bush. And John Kerry, Mr. Electable, came in and bungled that election. Gave that election away like a fool. And now you have the temerity to talk to us about who is and is not electable? Oh, we need someone electable like John Kerry or Hillary Clinton. Oh, that's an interesting theory. Did either one of them get elected? No, they both lost. And they both lost to idiots. But we should go with Bernie Sanders because he's not electable, only the establishment is. I think you might be misunderstanding that word. Someone who loses an election is by definition not electable.
Well, one other person who thinks that Bernie Sanders is not electable is Chris Matthews. Get a load of what he had to say on Morning Joe this morning. So we have that story, and we will also give you an update on the whole Rashida Tlaib booing Hillary Clinton story from the weekend. We'll be right back.
We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Guys, it's exciting times. Iowa caucuses tonight. You wanna know what the latest poll in New Hampshire is, which is next week? Bernie up by 15. That's an Emerson poll. NBC News Wall Street Journal poll came out a couple of days ago. Nationwide, Sanders has taken the lead. For the first time, +1 Sanders. Now, +1 is basically a statistical tie. A poll came out after that with Biden with a tiny bit of lead over Sanders, but Sanders gaining nationally, and meanwhile, starting to maybe pull away in Iowa. Obviously, we're gonna find out tonight, and then in New Hampshire seems to be running away with it. So here comes Bernie. Tonight is everything, guys. All of these elections over the next 4 weeks, we're gonna know. Very, very likely, we're gonna know who the next president is. This giant long buildup, and it might be over in 4 weeks. So tonight, we got the Iowa coverage right here, okay? We got a big show right now. Then we got Crystal Ball, we got Amanda Turgle from Huffington Post, and then we got a post game for the members, tyt.com/join, and then we pick it right back up with Iowa coverage starting at 9 p.m. Eastern. Me, Anna, John, Ben is in today, and Emma's in Iowa, and she's gonna join us from Iowa. And by the way, tomorrow, State of the Union. Don't miss all these giant news events. Obviously, next week, New Hampshire, State of the Union tomorrow with play-by-play analysis. As always, John, Anna, and JR with you guys. Got a great crew here. All right, now let me read you just a couple of quotes or comments here. Megan E was thinking the same thing we were in the member section. So is Kerry an electable nominee? I wonder if we have any evidence if he would be or not. Sarcasm. Okay, I love that, Megan. I love all of our members, and we do the show together, tyt.com/join. And I also love YouTube Super Chat, 2 people from there. Rexol says, your giddiness is making me giddy too. Thank you. And Almighty Ox says, caucusing tonight, a bit nervous, large Warren following here. Ooh, that's a report from in the field in Iowa. So keep those coming. And if you want to tweet to us too, if you're not a member, #TYT Live. And obviously we do prioritize members, and YouTube Super Chats also helps the show. Guys, let's find out what happens tonight. And don't get too excited yet, because it will be crushing if Bernie loses, and you never know. This polling is not overly reliable. Well, I'll talk more about that during the Iowa coverage though. Okay, what's next, Anna?
All right. 2 things are true regarding Chris Matthews. Number 1, he's obsessed with Tip O'Neill. It's all he seems to talk about. Number 2, he has great disdain for Bernie Sanders, and that was certainly clear during a recent segment on Morning Joe. Take a look.
I'm not happy. I'm not happy with this field. I think they got to find a candidate for president that could beat Trump.
And you don't think anybody in this field
I'm
can
looking.
beat Trump?
I'm still looking.
Still looking.
What's the problem?
Obvious problems. They're all problems. Bernie Sanders is not going to be president of the United States. Okay? I went back to the 72 race. I was a young volunteer for the DNC. I was working for a senator from Utah at the time. I've got to tell you, it feels a lot like it. A lot of giddiness, a lot of excitement, a thrill about this guy.
You're saying a lot like McGovern?
Well, exactly, because he was very excited. The party completely blew away a really good candidate like Muskie, a really good guy. Blew him right out of the water because he had some issues.
So those are some of his thoughts. I want to go to the next video real quick, and then we'll discuss.
Bernie's gonna ride high, and he's finally gonna get scrutiny about his whole life, his ideology, his whole life, who did he root for all his life? Who is this guy ideologically? It's not just the nice, good stuff like healthcare. Why does he say the stuff he does about Maduro and people like that? Why does he say Denmark one week and then somebody else? I mean, people gotta figure out who the guy is. Yeah. I think I know, because I've dealt with these guys most of my adult life. They're usually the guys at the card tables at an war rally. There'll be some old guy with some old literature from this socialist party to that, trying to sell it, trying to latch on to the anti-war movement. There's always guys like that, and they're usually, as Howard Fine once said, non-negotiable demands. Yelling up at the administration building during the anti-war movement. I know them. But I think the country's going to get to know him. I think we got a problem. We'll see.
I know this guy. I know this guy. You know, he's coming after my taxes. He's coming after my money. He's an anti-war movement. I know these guys. I know these guys. I mean, come on, just tell the truth. Just tell the truth. I mean, he has a significant lead over other Democratic candidates. They keep pretending like the thing that they're most concerned about is that he's unelectable, when in reality, he has an economic message that resonates across the board, regardless of political ideology. They don't want him to be the Democratic nominee. And despite their best efforts to destroy his chances, he persists. He has seen a rise in the polls, and he will continue to see a rise in the polls. Sorry, Chris Matthews, just be honest with your audience. You're worried about paying more in taxes. You're worried about being irrelevant, even though at this point in your career, you should be irrelevant.
So he went back to 1972 for that example, which they always do. Like, oh, did you know about 1972? Yeah, we all know about 1972. Chris, I don't know if you know this. There's this thing called the internet, and things have changed a little bit. So number one, it allows us to look up 1972 if we didn't know it, okay? And number two, it's all of your decades old analogies and metaphors don't work anymore. It's a totally different world. You know, Tip O'Neill said all politics is local. Dude, at the time, there's no internet. Yes, it's local because everybody's like, oh, what did the local papers say? Now all the local papers are out of business. Oh, well, you know what Tip O'Neill said in the year 1732? I don't care. Okay, well, you know, if you have these radical candidates, that's not an establishment figure, where they're unelectable. Well, let me go back to an ancient election as well. You going back to 72? I'll go all the way back to 2016, the last election, where the candidate you declared unelectable, Donald Trump, got elected. How many times did you say that on air, Chris? Oh, there's no way Trump can win. And you and all your buddies, to be fair to Chris Matthews, it isn't personal. It's all of them. There's no way Donald Trump can win. There's no way Donald Trump can win. And we here, even though we despise the man, said he could win. We were right, you were wrong. Did you ever learn anything from that? No, you told us Hillary Clinton was the most electable person ever, yet she didn't get elected. But now when we point that out, you get so offended. But my God, the important thing here is to actually pick someone who could beat Donald Trump. You're like, that's right, we need someone like Hillary Clinton. But she didn't get elected. We need someone that is not the same. We need someone who is different that could beat Donald Trump. And Donald Trump won, why? Because of fake populism. In real populism beats fake populism. Establishment asshattery does not beat populism. We just saw it. You don't have to go back to 72. So, and he's like, I know who this guy is. What does that mean? What does that mean? I know who this guy is. And he said, finally, we're gonna do scrutiny of Bernie Sanders.
I know.
Are you kidding me?
Thank you for bringing that up, because that was one of the things I wanted to comment on, but he said so many ridiculous things in that clip that I forgot about that. So he's been facing scrutiny since 2016, nonstop. It doesn't end. I mean, while the Democrats keep claiming that they care about party unity, you have Hillary Clinton still lying about him. Last Friday, she was on a podcast completely lying about Bernie Sanders, referring to him as undemocratic, as not doing enough for party unity back in 2016, even as he rallied in 39 to 40 different rallies on her behalf to help her get elected. I mean, come on. All he gets is scrutiny. Oh, he's a socialist, he's unelectable. They go, to his political affiliation. He's not a registered Democrat in Vermont. I mean, how much more do they want? I mean, all they do is go after him.
No, they're so blinded. They're like, no, we need to have good electable candidates. Like the person sitting next to me, Claire McCaskill. Claire, tell us how you won the last election. Oh, right, you lost the last election by being an establishment candidate in Missouri. And we all said you were an awesome candidate and we were all wrong. But you know what? We get paid millions of dollars every single year to be wrong.
That's right.
Because we're not actually trying to bring you news, we're trying to bring you propaganda about how you have to pick the person who's gonna give us the tax cuts.
It's incredible how people who identify as Democrats are fighting so hard to destroy the front runner. And again, it's not just because I like Bernie Sanders, I like his policies. I mean, even if you take a step back and you put your own biases aside, who in this race has an economic message, an economic populist message that resonates across the board? Why is it that so many people switched parties and voted for Trump in the last election? Because he was this fake populist who pretended like he cared about bringing jobs back to America, who pretended like he cared about those who had been neglected by previous administrations. Now you have someone who doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk, and that's Bernie Sanders. He has a long record that we can look at thanks to the internet and confirm that he's not some phony, someone who's actually concerned about the well-being of Americans. That's Bernie Sanders. That's why he resonates with so many people. Now, weirdly enough, I just want to juxtapose what Chris Matthews said to what another Bernie hater had to say, Bill Maher. Recently, Bill Maher said something about Bernie Sanders that was shocking to me, something that I already recognized, I already knew about, but hearing it from someone who's been so critical of Bernie was fascinating. Now, what you're about to see is Bill Maher saying something that's 100% correct about Bernie Sanders, and I want to dissect it further after we watch. Take a look.
I like Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, but I feel mostly, or have said, that somebody like Pete or Amy Klobuchar could win more easily. But I tell you why Bernie Sanders is attractive to me now, because he's the only Democrat who, like Trump, has an army. Who, when it gets to this other level, he's got a bunch of bad who will get in the streets.
What he's trying to say there is, look, Bernie Sanders has a loyal following. And they will fight, they will stop at nothing. They will fight for him, they will do what it takes to get him elected. And there's something powerful about that, because while I don't like drawing any type of similarities between Trump and Bernie, they're obviously very different people. The one thing that I do see in terms of a similarity is that both Trump and Bernie do have a very loyal following. And there was a recent poll done, we shared it on the show, that showed that out of all of the Democratic candidates, Bernie Sanders has voters who are sticking by his side. They're not, wavering in any way. And I thought it was interesting that Bill Maher brought that up. And so when they talk about electability, Bernie Sanders doesn't have fair weather fans. He has ardent supporters who will fight by his side. And it's not just about this election. You need supporters like that who will help you get things done once you're elected.
The rest of the candidates on the Democratic side have no energy. So how are they gonna get people to volunteer for them? How are they gonna get people to make sure they're talking to their family and friends and dragging them to the polls and making sure they vote, et cetera? That's how you win elections. But these people on cable news have no earthly idea. What's interesting is Donald Trump Jr. and Ben Shapiro within the last 24 hours said, don't underestimate Bernie Sanders.
Right.
And so like we warned about Trump, now you got Shapiro warning about Sanders from his side, because they're seeing there's actual electricity, there's energy, there's masses of people who are highly motivated to get this person to win.
Yep.
That's how you win elections. That's what makes you electable, you morons on cable news.
But the problem is, it's not that they see him as unelectable. I think that the reality is they see him as very electable, and that's what concerns them the most. And just to give you some numbers to back up what you were just saying. In a speech Saturday night, Sanders said that his canvassers had knocked on more than 500,000 doors in Iowa this year.
But so did Delaney's. Oh no, that's right, they did.
Who?
Exactly. Okay, so now, guys, you know what the press is trying to do now? The idea that Bernie didn't get scrutiny is hilarious. I showed you guys at the time when he announced this time around, Washington Post ran 4 columns that day attacking him. Not one that was positive, all 4 attacking him. But my favorite was one saying that his crowd sizes will diminish and he'll be like a one-hit wonder. I reposted that over the weekend next to a reporter showing a giant crowd for Bernie in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, okay? What happened to diminishing crowds? Are you guys ever going to admit how wrong your analysis is? How you hire people on purpose who don't care about facts at all, but drive an agenda. Speaking of that agenda, so I started getting calls from reporters. You know what they're doing now? And you might have seen some of those articles now. Oh, Bernie Sanders supporters are online are a real problem. They raise their voice sometimes, and it's unacceptable. It's against civility. Oh, I see. You're allowed to control the entire media and write negative article after negative article. Have Chris Matthews go and attack Bernie Sanders, have everybody attack Bernie Sanders 24/7 on every cable station, every one of them, right? But if someone says something on social media, how dare you, put him down, put him down. Don't let anyone ever say something that we have not agreed to, because that would not manufacture consent. Finally, what you just saw from Chris Matthews is not on Fox News. That's on MSNBC, what Washington considers the left-wing channel. Hilarious.
All right. The Rashida Tlaib story is lengthy, it's meaty. I want to take a break, so we have a good portion of time to dedicate to that and more. So we'll do that when we return. We'll be right back.